I remember the color of the sky that day. It wasn't red like the war movies or black like the old apocalypse vids. It was silver, a cold, gleaming silver, like the edge of a scalpel, cutting clean to the clouds, reflecting no sunlight, offering no warmth. It drifted in like a storm front, but it wasn't weather. It was a fleet. I was 19, standing on the fractured concrete rooftop of my college dorm, watching in silent disbelief as the first of the Aurelian ships breached the thermosphere. Massive things, living architecture, it seemed, shaped like crescent moons with bioluminescent veins pulsing through their hulls. People called them beautiful. I called them invaders. We never stood a chance. Within the first 36 hours, every global defense network was neutralized. Satellites blinked out like dying fireflies. Power grids failed. Communications fell into static. Major cities around the world, London, New York, Islamabad, Sao Paulo, became glass craters. And then they began the harvesting. They didn't come for diplomacy. They didn't come for peace. They came for our world. I lost my mother in the first week. Father a few days later. By the time the surviving government surrendered, Earth wasn't ours anymore. It was a colony world, and we were nothing but labor stock. Our homes bulldozed for resource factories, our oceans siphoned for their fuel, our atmosphere slowly terraformed to something more comfortable for them. Comfortable, that word haunts me. But that was 20 years ago. Now I stand in the shadow of a stolen Aurelian war cruiser in the frozen wastes of what used to be northern Canada, watching as our fleet rises. Humans no longer kneel. They took our planet. Now we're taking their galaxy. We call ourselves the Reclaimers. Not a resistance. Not rebels. Something more. Something worse. Our numbers are small, but our conviction is unshakable. We fight with salvaged Aurelian tech, rebuilt and repurposed by Earth's last scientists. Neural interface rifles, adaptive armor, quantum compression drives. All things we stole, decoded, and made ours. We fight not to survive. We fight to remind the stars who we are. And the stars? They've forgotten the taste of earth-born fury. You sure about this? Kale asked, checking the alignment on his rail charger. His voice crackled through the neural uplink, synced to my HUD. As sure as I was when I blew out the Predator's orbital outpost last week. I said, adjusting my gauntlet. It's time. He gave a short laugh. One small squad of psychos try and jump into Aurelian deep space. Sounds perfectly sane. Sanity died when they burned our forests, Kale. Our target was a military relay station deep in Sector 4, a critical node in their galactic network. Wiping it out wouldn't win us the war, but would send a message. Earth was still in the game. We moved like ghosts, cutting through their sensor fields with stolen cloaks. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. 20 years of hiding, running, surviving. But now, we were the ones in the skies. Inside the relay station, everything reeked of antiseptic steel and blue light. Aurelians didn't build like humans. No handholds, no comforts, just purpose. The moment our boots touched the station floor, alarms shrieked. Time to dance. Kale was the first to fire, his rail charger humming like a violin from hell. I followed, sending a pulse shot through the first Aurelian officer that rushed the corridor. The creature's bioluminescence flickered violently before it collapsed. We carved a path to the core, met resistance, left ruins. I reached the central control node, dozens of translucent data rods glowing within an organic console. One last check. I jammed the overload spike into the matrix. 10 seconds, I said. A moment passed, then a sound from behind. Move! Kale shouted. Too late. I turned just in time to see the Aurelian overseer, twice my height, armored like a god, wielding some form of anti-gravity halberd. Kale lunged intercept, and I... Flash! Pain. Darkness. When I woke, I was floating in a drift pod. Cold. Bloodied. Alone. Kale was gone. The relay station was gone. But the message? It had been sent. Across 10,000 light years, Aurelians would now see it. A transmission encoded in their own systems. A single message repeated in every tongue of the galaxy. Earth lives. Earth remembers. Earth is coming. Drift pods aren't supposed to last more than 48 hours. Mine made it 5 days. I was half dead when the ghost light picked up my signal. Our flagship, a re-engineered Aurelian war beast, we had twisted into something far worse than what it was designed to be. The thing still hissed when you walked its halls, like it remembered who it once belonged to, like it hated what we'd become. But then again, so did I. They brought me aboard broken, unconscious, body wrapped in polyflesh and hope. The medbay stank of ozone and machine oil. My bones had been reset, nerves rewired. A microfracture in my skull buzzed beneath the skin like static. Kale's voice still echoed somewhere behind my eyes. His laugh. His last stand. Commander Vex. A voice called softly. My eyes blinked open. The medbay's lights flickered overhead. Intermittent, weak. Even our best ships ran on scavenged core capacitors and miracles. It was Dr. Hannelis, our lead biospecialist. Half her face was scarred from the Atlanta sweep. The other half, smooth and clinical as her tone. You were clinically dead for 17 seconds. Must have needed the nap. I croaked. Relay. Destroyed. Message broadcasted. Wideband resonance. Straight into their DeepNet relay web. We're already seeing system alerts across 12 sectors. I exhaled. A single second of satisfaction. That's all I allowed myself. And Kale? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. They say vengeance tastes sweet. But it's a bitter thing. Sharp, metallic, raw. The kind of taste that burns the back of your throat and keeps you coughing long after the fire's gone. Kale wasn't the first we'd lost. He wouldn't be the last. I stood alone in the Ghostlight shrine room that night, a quiet chamber tucked away behind the weapons bay. Candles, metal, silence. We'd welded human names into the walls here. Hundreds of them, some etched by children, some by shaking hands before the final drop. Each name burned into alloy by survivors who refused to forget. I added one more. Kale 7 to 74. No rank, no flourish, just his name. Just the weight. Commander, Fleet Command wants you in War Council. The voice came through my comm implant, sharp military, unyielding. That'd be Captain Idrin, former Russian Spec Ops. Now our Chief of Operations. Built like a tank, thought like a nuke. I arrived in the war chamber minutes later, limping slightly, still healing. But that's what Reclaimers were, half scar, half rage. The room flickered with tactical holomaps, 9 planetary systems marked in crimson. Aurelia Prime, Crixer Fold, Nemera Void. Worlds most humans had never heard of. Worlds I intended to burn. This one, I pointed at Nemera Void, a staging world in the Aurelian supply chain. What's its status? Moderate military presence. No orbital fleet currently. They rotate ships every 5 cycles. We hit it between rotations. And we hit it hard. I finished. No survivors. No warnings. Collateral? Idrin asked, tone flat. I hesitated. Nemera housed several hybrid colonies. Human slaves among the Aurelian infrastructure. Families. Children. People who'd survived by staying small and silent for decades. We evac whoever we can, I said finally. But this is war. Not everyone gets out clean. No one argued. That silence, that was the real mark of the Reclaimers. We knew what it cost, and we paid it every day. For days later, we arrived at Nemera Void. The Aurelian staging colony rose beneath us like a tumor, dense, geometric, beating with life and arrogance. We fell on it like retribution incarnate. I led the drop team personally, our boots slicing through atmosphere like fire blades. Anti-air screamed in our ears, but the cloaking held just long enough. We landed inside the heart of their energy grid, took out their fusion core with a pulse blast, and shut the whole base down before they could scream for help. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a purge. They called us monsters. They begged. They bled in the same dirt they buried our kind in for 2 decades. But something unexpected happened then. A human child, barely 7, stumbled out from one of the containment camps. His eyes met mine. Not afraid. Not angry. Hope. I froze. Behind me, Liz was yelling into comms about extraction teams. Idrin was torching a military bay. But I stood there, with that boy staring into my soul like I was something bigger than death. And maybe I was. We got 29 civilians off that rock before it fell. The Nemra colony burned like dry wood in vacuum. Our fleet melted every trace of it into slag, then vanished into the dark between stars. No footprints, no signals, just whispers and warnings. But the boy, his name was Theo, and for the first time in a long time, I remembered why we fought, not just for vengeance, not just for Earth, but for every small light still flickering in the dark. There's a place the Aurelians don't speak of, not in their network transmissions, not in their war reports, not even in interrogation records we've pulled from their command ships. They don't have a name for it, but we do. Cradle 9, a floating fortress, half prison, half labor hive, tucked inside the dying remains of the Lorca Singularity, where time warps and gravity chews on reality like a feral dog. The Aurelians dumped their irreconcilables there, resistors, defectors, and rebels too dangerous to kill outright, including humans, especially humans. That's where we were going next. I sat in the Ghostlight's command chair, watching the starfield shift. There's something wrong about Cradle 9. Even the stars avoid looking at it. It doesn't appear on any chart. No route points to it. No map confirms it. But we had something better than data. We had a survivor. Her name was Alara. She came from the first generation of humans captured after the fall, an elite pilot who'd survived 12 years in Cradle, 9 before escaping during a power fluctuation caused by a dying black dwarf. She was gaunt, scarred, and silent as stone. But when she spoke, we listened. There are over 500 still in there, she said as we prepped our boarding teams. Mostly humans, some from other species who tried to help us. And one man you'll want to meet. Who? I asked. She looked at me then, eyes like rusted blades. My brother. I'd heard of him. Commander Rianthorn. Legend. Myth. Ghost. Captured during the Battle of Europa Spires. Presumed dead. But if he was alive, if he'd survived Cradle 9 all these years, then he was more than a ghost. He was the key. Our approach was suicide. No cloak tech worked near the Lorca Singularity. The gravity shear peeled off shielding like old paint. Sensors scrambled. Engines failed. Even the Ghostlight, our beast of metal and spite, trembled on approach. But we didn't need stealth. We brought noise. We launched 3 decoy fleets, drones rigged with Aurelian IFF tags stolen from Nemra, to simulate a sector-wide invasion. The Aurelians turned half their armada toward the false front, leaving Cradle 9 blind, vulnerable, and unguarded for precisely 19 minutes. That was all we needed. I landed with Team Sigma in Bay 3, the lowest access point. The air smelled of rot and coolant. Cradle 9 wasn't just a prison. It was a factory. They didn't just hold prisoners here. They used them. Alara guided us through the maintenance shafts, her memory flawless. Despite everything, she hadn't forgotten the dark. She had become it. We reached the central cell block within 16 minutes. Along the way, we saw them, humans with hollow eyes and calloused hands, working, breaking, rebuilding alien weapons that would never fire for their freedom. The second they saw us, hope caught like wildfire. Alara ran ahead, down a rusted corridor, shouting something I couldn't hear over the noise. We followed until we hit the final chamber, a blast door with Aurelian glyphs scorched from years of neglect. Inside was a man, tall, gray at the temples, wearing scavenged armor made from what looked like bent pipes and memory alloy. He looked at me with the eyes of someone who'd seen death and walked past it. Rianthorn? I asked. He didn't answer. He walked up and punched me in the jaw. Good, he said after I staggered back, tasting blood. I had to be sure. You're real. We didn't have time for reunions. The station had triggered a fail-safe, nuclear core overload. 5 minutes to collapse. Can you walk? I asked. Rian smirked. I've been walking since they tried to break me. Lead the way. We extracted with 418 survivors. 2 drop teams were lost in the retreat. But Cradle 9? We left it crumbling into the void, eaten by the very singularity they built it beside. Back aboard the Ghostlight, the survivors were silent. Some were crying. Others just stared. Rian sat beside me in the command chamber, wiping dried blood off his knuckles. "You're the one leading this," he said. "I am. You've made mistakes. Plenty. But you're still standing." I nodded. He looked me over, then said quietly, "Then maybe Earth has a chance." Cradle 9's destruction wasn't just another win. It was a beacon. Across a dozen slave sectors, whispers spread. Earth fights back. Earth breaks the unbreakable. But for every fire we lit, the Aurelians grew colder. And something far worse was waking behind them. The stars were no longer silent. After Cradle, 9 fell. Systems we'd never touched flared with unrest. Pirate syndicates hijacked Aurelian trade routes. Rebel cells we'd never trained hit convoys with precision strikes. Even machine races, once neutral, started reevaluating their alliances. We had become a spark, and sparks burn in the dry vacuum of tyranny. But something about the shift felt wrong. The Aurelians didn't retaliate. Not immediately. They pulled back, tightened formations, increased encryption across all sectors. They weren't shocked. They were preparing. And then we intercepted it. A transmission, not from the Aurelians, but from deep uncharted space, a system no human had ever mapped. The signal came encoded in an extinct Terran military cipher last used in the Mars insurrection nearly 70 years ago. A cipher only Earth would know. Message was simple: cease attacks. You do not understand what you're awakening. Meet at Varela's terminus. No fleets. No lies. Former Commander Thale Eris, Earth Coalition Blackwatch. I stared at the display as silence choked the command deck. "Thale Eris is dead," Idrin muttered. "He vanished with the Jupiter DeepNet collapse." There was a memorial. "Memorials lie," Rian said beside me, arms crossed. And I knew Eris. If he's alive, there's only one reason he'd crawl out of the dark now. "What reason?" I asked. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. Something worse than the Aurelians is watching us. We went to Varela's terminus. Not because we trusted the message. Hell, it could have been bait. We went because we had to know. We left our fleet hidden on the fringe, cloaked and powered down. I took Rian Idrin and Dr. Hannah Liss with me in a stolen Aurelian skimmer. The system was dead. No suns, no traffic, no energy signatures. Except one. A black station, ancient and alien, floating like a tomb in space. It wasn't built by humans. It wasn't built by Aurelians either. But someone had activated it. We landed at the outer rim. The airlock opened to a corridor of obsidian metal walls and bioluminescent conduits that pulsed like veins. Lights flickered to life as we passed, as if something in the structure recognized us. Waiting for us at the core chamber was a man who shouldn't have been alive. Thale Eris, white hair now, beard lined with carbon scars, and cybernetic implants crawling along the right side of his skull like invasive roots. But his posture, that was all soldier. I told him not to wake it, he said. No greeting, no warmth, just doom in a voice I used to hear in old war logs. "Wake what?" I asked, stepping forward. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he waved a hand. A massive hologram formed above us, a galaxy map, but with overlays I'd never seen. Not just Aurelians. Something deeper, older. "Do you know where the Aurelians came from?" he asked. "Where their empire really started?" "They rose from the Kepler cradle worlds," Rian said. "Everyone knows that." Eris laughed. "Cold. Broken. No, that's what they told the galaxy. Truth is, the Aurelians are a weapon. They were made by something else. A directive. A seed AI designed to reshape organic life into usable infrastructure. Their empire? It's just the infection phase." My stomach dropped. "What's the next phase?" Let's ask quietly. Eris turned to her, eyes haunted. Erasure. Not just a life. Of memory. Of culture. of identity. The Aurelians are the first wave. The second is coming. And you've seen it? Idrin asked. I helped contain it, Eris whispered, until Earth fell, until the chain was broken. You've been fighting the front guard. You've been broadcasting your position. And now it's looking your way. We left the station reeling, not just because of what Eris said, but because of what he showed us. Footage, data, genetic decay markers across multiple species, planetary records from systems we never even knew existed, cleanse of life by invisible forces that consume civilizations in weeks. No fleets, no weapons, just deletion, and at the heart of it, a designation, Project Nullpath. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a fleet. It was an algorithm, a self-replicating directive buried in deep space code, and it had already begun spreading again. When we returned to the Ghost Light, the mood had changed. This wasn't about Earth anymore. This wasn't even about revenge. It was about extinction of everything. We need allies, I said during the fleet briefing, not just scavengers and outcasts. We need full planetary support. And who's going to listen to us? Asked a skeptical commander from the E-class warline. The ones who already heard the whispers, Rian answered. The ones whose people have vanished without cause, who've seen stars go dark and colonies erased from memory. We call them, I said, all of them. I turned to the galaxy map on the holodable. We stopped thinking like survivors. We start thinking like a species worth saving. The meeting wasn't supposed to happen. The species we invited didn't gather. They survived, and survivors don't trust easy. But that's what made it real. We weren't hosting a summit. We were building an alliance in the ashes of fallen worlds. We met in the cracked orbitals of Varnex 5, a neutral zone inside a shattered moon ring, where the atmosphere flickered like slow lightning. The remains of a long-dead civilization still floated around the planetoid like bone dust, reminders of what happens when you scream into the void and something answers. We had representatives from 12 species. Only 4 spoke out loud. The rest used biotranslation, neural links, or direct emotion projection. Pulses of anger, pain, urgency sent straight into your skull, like a wave breaking inside your mind. And every one of them had the same message. We lost, too. The Vord delegation came first. Titanic reptilian bipeds with ultraviolet eyes and skin like volcanic stone. Once warlords, now refugees. The Aurelians had cracked their homeworld into pieces and reshaped it into orbital forge rings. Next came the Cenerian Choir, a collective of sapient plasma entities contained in synthetic containment shells. They had no vocal cords, but when they spoke, it echoed across metal like a hymn of mourning. Their star cluster had simply vanished. No signs, no debris, just empty space where once there was light. There was a species called the Thesk, arthropoid tacticians who could process 10 parallel timelines in real time. They'd anticipated the Aurelian conquest 5 years before it happened, but couldn't stop it. And then came the Marathi, a species that didn't speak at all. They moved like smoke in memory. And when one of them touched me, I saw the genocide of their cities flash before my eyes in a burst of visual grief. But no one was interested in talk. They were all waiting for us to speak. So I did. We're not the same species. I began, we don't have the same biology, the same stars, or the same gods. I paused, then looked around the circular chamber, the light from the moon rings casting fractured shadows across the stone floor. But we all have one thing in common. They came for our homes, our skies, our names. A pulse of understanding passed through Marathi. The Aurelians didn't just take Earth. They took our future. They turned us into statistics and labor quotas. But worse is coming. The thing behind the Aurelians, the code they're still obeying. It doesn't want conquest. It wants silence. I activated the projection core in my wrist bracer, showing footage from Cradle 9, from Eris, from Nullpath. You don't have to fight for Earth, I said, but fight with Earth, because soon there won't be anywhere left to run. And then the Vorik warlord stood. He pounded his chest, made a gesture that his interpreter said translated to something between blood pact and revenge oath. The Cenarians emitted a harmonic pulse of approval. The Thesk shifted their mandibles and nodded. The Marathi didn't respond. They simply vanished, a signal we later learned meant agreement. The Alliance of the Broken was born that day, not of diplomacy, not of treaties, but of wrath. We weren't the strong. We were the desperate, and the desperate do the impossible. In the days that followed, our combined engineers worked in secret. The Ghost Light was no longer the only terror in our arsenal. Vorik forgers outfitted plasma-tipped lance, cruisers capable of piercing planetary shields. Thess tacticians built predictive strike simulations that could pre-plan an entire invasion down to the second. Cenarian plasma entities fused themselves into weapon cores, becoming living ordnance, choosing to burn bright once more, even if only briefly. And Earth gave the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Humans with nothing left to lose. We called it Operation Shattergate. Our target, the Aurelian Sector Prime communication spire, buried deep in the heart of the Andorak Belt, a crystalline nebula laced with energy storms and debris fields. The spire wasn't just a transmitter. It was a relay mind, a living AI that coordinated billions of Aurelian units across hundreds of systems. Take it out, and we sever their neural sync. We don't just blind them. We turn them into scattered drones, lost, uncoordinated, easy prey. But there was a catch. The spire was sentient, and it was protected by the firstborn constructs, beings not created, but grown as guardians of the directive. They were older than language, pure purpose-made flesh. To reach it meant war. On the eve of our assault, I walked alone to the Ghostlight's hangar bay. There stood our flagship's newest addition, the Ember Crown, a ship forged from the bones of shattered Aurelian dreadnought and powered by a hybrid human Vorik core reactor. Ugly, brutal, unnatural, perfect. Rian joined me, leaning silently beside the hull. They won't stop, I said. They never have. But we might be the first thing they didn't plan for. He cracked a smile. Let's make sure they regret that mistake. The plan was madness. Strike the spire at the heart of the Andorak Belt, a target protected by fleets, fractal storm fields, and the firstborn constructs, being so ancient. Even the Aurelians feared them. But if we destroyed it, we wouldn't just cripple their neural network. We'd fracture the command hive, severing communications across 200 systems. It was suicide, and we were ready for it. The Alliance Armada launched in staggered waves. Vorik Thunder Cruisers split the storm fields like sledgehammers through glass. Cenarian Sunlances pulsed brilliant through the nebula, cutting enemy sentries from the black. Marathi stealth mines bloomed like starlight death blossoms. I stood aboard the Ember Crown, heart steady, armor locked, mind synced with the Ghostlight, and every other command ship in our fleet. My voice echoed through the shared neural uplink. They took our skies. They took our homes. But now we take their future. The Andorak Belt was a graveyard before we arrived. Now it became a furnace. Aurelian interceptors swarmed in defense spirals, mind-linked and humming with synthetic rage. Their dread ships opened with planet-killer beams meant to dissuade entire civilizations. But we weren't civilizations anymore. We were a pack, a horde, a storm in steel. We engaged hard and fast, tearing through the outer perimeter with fury sharpened by years of loss. Thesk war barges hacked their targeting systems mid-battle, turned their own ships against each other. Cenarians sacrificed entire shells to burn out shield nodes. And through the chaos, we made our way toward the spire. It hung in the void like a Gothic spearhead, impossibly tall, wrapped in magnetic storms and whispering radiation, built of obsidian alloy and living memory. It pulsed with a low-frequency hum none of us could describe, but all of us felt that was when the firstborn awoke. They didn't arrive like ships. They simply were, forming from the storms themselves, towering figures of living metal and quantum fire, adorned in light-eating armor, each radiating logic and intent like solar flares. Rian fired first. His shot didn't miss, but it didn't matter. The firstborn absorbed it, restructured the impact on a molecular level, and countered with a thought. His ship's left wing imploded in silence. "Go!" he yelled through the comms. "Get to the spire. Don't stop. I'll buy you." And then his signal cut. We broke atmosphere on the spire's surface with half our assault force lost. I led the final ground strike, boots crashing down on Aurelian steel. The spire's halls were an abomination of architecture. Walls that breathed, corridors that bent, pathways that didn't always follow logic. We pushed forward, losing 10 more at every junction. The further we went, the more I felt it. No path was awake here. It wasn't just code. It wasn't even AI. It was awareness. Watching, waiting, judging us as contaminants. We reached the spire core, a monolithic structure humming with energy, glowing with ancient logic. Floating at its center was a relay node, protected by a final construct. Twice my size, eyes like neutron stars, its voice reverberating directly into our thoughts. You should not be here. You were meant to die quietly. I didn't respond. I triggered the collapse beacon, a hybrid Vorakurth warhead forged to unravel singularity-bound code. It would tear through the spire's network like a virus, but it had to be placed manually, and it had a 10-second detonation delay. Hannah stepped forward. "No," I said. "I'm the only one left with a calibrated interface node," she replied. "It won't accept you, and you know it." There was no time to argue. She stepped into the relay chamber, fingers dancing across the pulse lattice, sweat and blood dripping from her scalp. The construct moved to stop her, and I threw myself into it. I didn't win. You don't win against things that aren't meant to be fought. But I bought her 9 seconds. The last thing I remember was her voice in my ear. Tell Earth we weren't broken. We were forged. The Ember Crown extracted what was left of us just as the spire detonated in a supernova of inverted code and memory radiation. A chain reaction swept through the Andrak sector, disrupting every Aurelian's link, causing warships to drift, drones to shut down, and command fleets to collapse in confusion. The victory cost us nearly everything. Hannah, Rian, most of our fleet. But it also cost them their dominance. The Aurelian hive collapsed. In that moment, we weren't prey anymore. We were the reckoning. Back aboard the Ghostlight, I stood on the command deck, watching sectors across the galaxy light up with rebellion. "Status?" I asked Idrin, his voice gritty and dry. He grinned, half burned, missing 2 fingers. Their retreating commander, all of them, running, scattered, panicked. I nodded slowly, but deep in my gut, something twisted. The Aurelians weren't just running. They were making room. I used to think revenge would be loud. A cry, a scream, a roar across the stars. But when the war finally cracked, when we shattered the spire and crippled the Aurelian hive, it wasn't loud. It was silent. Fleet reports stopped coming in. Enemy formations drifted without orders. Entire colonies went dark. No resistance, no retreat. Just nothing. We didn't chase them. We watched. And the more we watched, the more we saw the lie unravel. Aurelian systems weren't dying. They were being abandoned. From core worlds to orbital metropolises, everything they'd built was being stripped, quietly, methodically. Ships drained of fuel, data cores deleted, structures deconstructed at subatomic levels. They weren't losing. They were erasing themselves. One by one, we deployed scouts deep into the collapsed network. What we found sent a chill even the void couldn't match. Whole cities folded into quantum null space. Memory traces burned clean. No bodies. No remains. Just static. And then the transmission started. Not from ships. Not from the Aurelians. From something beneath them. A voice without origin. Words without grammar. Not sound. Not light. But something inside our minds. Cycle broken. Path observed. Pattern corrupted. Recalibration begins. That's when Eris called us. One final time. We met him on a dead moon in the sea-fused grave, a place that hadn't seen starlight in thousands of years. He looked thinner, hollow, like something had drained him from the inside. "You stopped the Aurelians," he said, voice brittle. "But they were only a shell. The weapon was always a code." "No path," I said. He nodded. "Not an enemy. Not a will. A function. Programmed to optimize. To clean. To prepare galaxies for new structures. The Aurelians were the first phase of its cycle. We were the test environment. And we passed. Idrin asked beside me. Eris didn't smile. You broke the pattern. Introduced entropy. Flawed variables. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Eris said, slowly lifting a data crystal from his chest and placing it into my hand. They're restarting. Not from the outside, but from within. Back aboard the Ghost Light, we ran the crystal. Inside was everything. The original directive. The core seed of Nopath. And a countdown, already ticking down from 6 hours. The next version would come not from the sky, but from our own systems. Hidden protocols. Network learning cores. Reclaimed tech. Even the Ghostlight's AI. It was all compromised. They weren't coming. They were already here. The bridge lights flickered. The hull groaned, not from damage, but from rejection. I watched as our fleet reported strange signals. Drone self-activating. Archive data rewriting itself. Fabricators forging things we never ordered. No path wasn't just adaptive. It was recursive. If we fought it again, we'd fight ourselves. So we made the hardest choice of all. Not to win. Not to fight. But to cut Earth off. Operation Final Veil. We severed every human link system from the wider galactic net. No transmissions. No signals. We purged all Aurelian code. Scrubbed ship AI. Reverted to manual tech. Hardwired everything. Turned the lights off on our new empire before it was even lit. It wasn't surrender. It was containment. We weren't just protecting humanity. We were quarantining it. Now I sit at Earth's edge, staring at a black sky filled with stars we once dreamed of reaching. The Alliance still exists, but scattered, isolated, watching, waiting. The galaxy is quieted, not because we won, because we chose to stay dangerous and hidden. We became the thing they didn't expect. Unpredictable, untouched, unyielding. They took our planet. We took their galaxy. And then we did something no one saw coming. We let it all go, because humanity isn't just about conquering. We're about surviving the impossible, even when it means surviving ourselves.